So then we can proceed and start the next cPouta webinar. And the topic for today's webinar is going to be automating parts of your cPouta deployments with a tool called Ansible. And based on some previous user feedback, I thought it might be a good thing to first off align our targets for today. So I'm going to write a simple bullet list for our targets that we want to do or accomplish during this webinar. So the first thing is for sure going to be install Ansible to a control host, and because we need to have that in order to, of course, do this automation. And it's going to be, I would say, useful to see end-to-end installation of the Ansible tool as well, because it might not be pre-loaded to a system that you have access to. The second target for today is going to be installation of scientific software, and let's make that automated installation of scientific software to a VM. And if we have time, we'll continue to reusing an existing Ansible playbook. All right, so let's keep those targets in mind. We can take Q&A after the main content of the webinar, so at the end, either via chat or microphone. And without further ado, I'm now going to start progressing this install Ansible to control host target. So for this particular task, I'm first going to log into cPouta and create myself a virtual machine. And for this particular webinar, I've chosen that I'm going to be using a Ubuntu flavor virtual machine. So let's first go to the instances page, and I'm going to launch myself an instance. This is going to be a tiny instance. We don't need much resources for this type of activity. So let's call it Ansible control host and use the flavor tiny. And for the image, let's select this Ubuntu 15.04. We should fairly shortly have the Ubuntu 16.04 too. So I'm going to use this key pair webinar key that I've prepared for this presentation, and then enable a security group so I can do the initial access to the control host. So without further ado, let's go ahead and launch that VM. And once it is launching, I can go ahead and associate a floating IP to it. Let's see if the port is already available. It is. So there. And now, in a matter of seconds, we have a Ansible control host up and running in cPouta. So I have a pre-configuration for using the key related to this machine, but most likely the firewall of the machine is not up and running yet, so we may have to wait a little bit of time. In the interim, we can go and view the logs to see that everything has been loaded there. Okay, so there we have a key injected and everything is looking good. So let's restart. Yeah, I've used reusing this IP address. I have used this before, so that's why I get an error message. Now we wait for a little bit for the login to activate. And typically what I do in an Ubuntu or Debian-based system is I use this easy install tool to install the base packages of whatever Python dependencies I may have. So first off, let's do apt-get update so we get package catalog nice and up to date, and after that we can install the dependencies for this easy install, and then we get sort of on the track to installing Ansible. So apt-get install. Python setup tools and Python dev. Setup tools is the package that contains easy install, and Python dev is kind of a dependency for various things that we're going to be doing going forward. For example, with pip and whatnot. There we had a very pessimistic estimated time of arrival of 8 minutes, so most likely this machine landed on a hypervisor that is running a lot of other virtual machines and doing kind of a competition of the local disk and local I/O resources. So we had a momentary spike of not so good I/O activity available for this VM, but luckily now things have gotten more rapid. So perhaps I should have used the volume for this instead of the local ephemeral disk, but let's consider it good enough for us for now. And this unpacking and whatnot should not take that much time. For the later part of the presentation, I kind of have a dependency in installing a program called Shade. So that's why after this easy install thing is available, I'm going to be installing another tool called pip. And after that, we can start the core Ansible installation. So while this is progressing, let's see if we can break down our targets for today in a little more. So easy install pip. All right. There we go. And now we do sudo easy install pip, which shouldn't take really that long. All right. And then finally, we do sudo pip install Ansible, which is kind of getting to the meat of today's presentation. And while that is happening, I in fact can go and upload an SSH key, because this is a control host and I'm going to be using it to traverse to other hosts. So to this new host, I do need to upload the webinar key that I mentioned. And we can take care of that while that other action is completing. So let's upload it to the cloud user home directory like so. And now, in fact, we should already have Ansible available. We do. So let's set up our key. What we want to do is chmod 0600 at least for the webinar key. So it's set up nicely with its properties or ownership conditions, and then move it to the SSH folder. And then I'm going to do this action that I think I showed in the last webinar. So I'm going to start a so-called SSH agent and then add this key to the agent in question. All right, good. So we can perhaps add setup SSH key in Ansible control host also to this target or agenda for today. Okay, so now we have an Ansible control host, and the idea of this today's presentation is to allow you to see how Ansible can help your day-to-day life in using the cPouta cloud, creating virtual machines, installing software, doing any kind of task that can be repetitive and thus automated. So for the creating virtual machine part, I'm going to get into that later. And for this initial test, I'm going to do this via the GUI-driven method. And for this particular case, I'm going to call the VM in question JN Ansible test, also with the tiny flavor and with the same Ubuntu image I was using previously, and also with the same webinar key. And for this I have a SSH security group that allows the Ansible control host to access this particular machine. So then moving on to our next target. This step would be install target VM manually. And the next one would be, after we've verified that connectivity works and so on and so forth, the next one would be to install this Ansible Playbook. And what's a playbook? We're going to get to that shortly too. So now I have my VM up and running. It's created with the SSH key, webinar key, and it has this and this IP address. So given that I've started the SSH agent and I do have the key here in memory, what I should be able to do is form an SSH connection with this cloud user that we use by default in our images that are built by CSC to this new target VM. Let's see what happens. Waiting. So that worked nicely. Good. Now we have a surrogate or a kind of a template machine that we can start working with. So what is this Ansible then? It's a tool or a program for automating anything between heaven and earth you might want to be doing with your virtual machines or hosts running, or even up to physical computers. And we can do with Ansible operations such as setup, which simply obtains any and all information that it can retrieve from the target host. So using this IP address for the new VM, I should be able to conjure information about this host. Let's see. Specified host option. I probably need to do Ansible all and then the IP address. Missing target host. Let's use that. And then cloud user. I've hit a snag here, so let's do a directory called Ansible prep area or something like that. And here I'll create an inventory file because that's what we have to do anyway. And here I make a proper definition that my Ansible user is cloud user and so on and so forth. We are going to need this inventory file anyway. So let's try to run that command with the inventory file. Then we probably make a little headway. No errors yet. Okay, so using this SSH agent, Ansible is making a connection to the host in question and retrieving these Ansible facts, so-called, that may consist of network information, the system's notion of time, disk and other devices, locale settings, what have you. So we get a lot of information from this particular system with this setup. But I'm not going to concentrate into Ansible one-liners in this webinar, but rather what I want to show you, the audience, is this Ansible Playbook functionality that allows you to define a set of tasks and in the end an end state for the system where it should end up with by running this particular playbook. So let's go ahead and progress with that. I'm actually going to rename this Ansible prep to Ansible demo playbook. And using still this same inventory file that has the new virtual machine IP and the cloud user definition, I'm now going to start writing a so-called playbook. Let's call it test playbook, for example. And this is using the YAML structure of a file. So, for example, we denote a list with this dash. And first thing I'm going to do is define the hosts for which we run the particular playbook. And out of those hosts in the inventory file, I'm simply going to select all. And since we're going to be installing software, I'm going to define a become definition with the become user definition of root, because I most likely am going to need root user for whatever I'm going to be doing next. Playbook, if you Google, for example, for Ansible Playbook example, you get very good and concise documentation from the Ansible site. And here we see an example playbook where we do have the hosts entry, then some variables, tasks, handlers, and roles, all of which we most likely will dig deeper into in the upcoming webinars that we're doing at CSC. But for today, we're mainly going to be using the tasks and variables. And what I'm going to be installing in this target host is a so-called iRods client, which can then be used to access the CSC EDA service. So let's say you have some genome data on your host and you want to archive it, then this tool could be used for that end. And for that, I'm going to be needing some variables. So let's start with that. I'm going to need an organization variable. Let's call that CSC. Then I'm going to need a project variable. Let's call, well, this I got when I registered to EDA. So I'm using an EDA demo project, and then a user name. And I'm going to be using my own user name, Junosia. All right. Then we define the tasks that we want to accomplish when we run the playbook, and I'm going to start with a simple task. So let's call it update packages. And I'm simply going to run the apt module. This is not a command, but it's an Ansible module that we use. And here it's important to understand that I'm defining the end state of the system. So I'm not saying that you need to run the apt-get update command, but rather I'm saying that if the system is in a state where packages have been updated, we don't need to do anything. But if packages are out of date or the package cache is out of date, then we do need to do an update for that. So next up, we can in fact try running this playbook. So we use the inventory.txt file that I used previously, and then the reference to the playbook.yaml, and see what happens. The end result is that on this new VM that I installed, all the package cache entries for the apt would be up to date. And here we see that the task setup, which I ran previously, it's already in OK state, so we in fact know all the facts about the system, and also none of the packages needed updating because this task is also in OK. It could have also been in changed or error state. Okay, let's continue then by creating an just one moment. Task for obtaining the iRods client. And for this, I'm going to be using a module called getURL, which effectively is a kind of a, not wrapper, but it's a module that uses wget type functionality to obtain a package. So if I go for irods.org/download, I am able to get the URL for the CLI package for Ubuntu here. Let's copy that. And then I'm going to need a destination parameter too. So let's define root's home directory for that. Next up, we need to install this package that we retrieve with the playbook. For that, I again use the apt module, and this time around I reference a specific package. We could of course use a relative directory here, but given that we have some time constraints, I'll just use like a static directory there. All right. And then there's a couple of dependencies for the iRuts client, namely we need to have a configuration in a directory. So let's call it create iRuts conf directory. And for this we use the Ansible file module. And again we defined that for the path /home /cloud user /iRuts, the state must be directory. So the end state of this particular entry needs to be a directory that exists. If it exists already, cool beans. If not, we'll create it when running the playbook next. So we should of course see the green OK entries again for the setup and update packages portion. Fingers crossed. So now it's doing a wget like operation for the iRuts client Debian package, which shouldn't be that big in size. So now it's finished, and next up it should do the installation of the CLI tools for iRuts and create the configuration directory. Well, that's great. It finished already. So now we should be able to take a quick peek into the host and run the iRuts ls command. And we see that the configuration is still missing. So the binary is in place, installed with this automated fashion. However, the configuration is missing. So let's fix that still. In the playbook structure, there actually, let's check from here. There should be a directory called templates if you are using these templates for anything in terms of, let's say, configuration files. And here, this is definitely a good use case for it. So I'm going to use the Jinja2 template file name suffix, and then let's search for CSC EDA client. That should give us the information on the CSC homepage for the configuration file definition. And that is here. So let's just throw it in there. And previously I mentioned that I'm going to be needing variables. So let's take a quick peek there. I used organization, project, and username. And how they're referenced in the Jinja template is thus. So 2 curly brackets. And for the project, same thing. And then I have this extra directory named by my user, so I'm going to use that as an additional directory to define my iRuts home directory. Also replacing the username here. iRuts username definition here. All right, so now we have a template. Let's take one final look on how that looks. Right? And now we can insert that into our test playbook. So in Ansible, typically you don't need to define any shell commands. You have a module for most everything, and that also applies to the templates here. So you don't need to define a cp command or do any like in-place editing with sed. The Ansible module takes care of that for you. So I do install iRods config, and I'm using the template module. And for source, I reference iRods.j2. The templates is a kind of a default directory in the playbook structure, so I don't even need to reference that. I just need to put the destination equals home cloud user / iRods, and I think this is mentioned here, iRods environment .json. All right. Now let's rerun the playbook. All the operations are so-called idempotent operations. So if the end state is okay, then the operation is not executed. But if something has changed, then we are going to see a yellow marking of a changed operation. And hopefully we don't hit any errors. But if that occurs, then we also see like a red error message here on the on-screen output. All right, so only the last portion there changed. Good stuff. And now we can take one final peek into the system to see how the ILS command works now. It's asking me for a password, so let's enter that. Unfortunately, I won't tell it to the audience, but the command worked for sure, and my directory ida csc ida demo unosia is in fact empty. Perhaps we'll do something to that as well, just to demonstrate that this is really a working piece of software. So let's dd something from /dev urandom to output of webinar test.dd 10 let's say 10 megabytes of random bits and bytes. And then let's do an input operation, webinar test dd. Then I again type in my password. And now this 10 megabyte chunk should be visible if we rerun the ILS command. Sure enough, it is there. So looks like for today's webinar, I was kind of too ambitious in reusing this existing Ansible playbook, because that's a kind of a next level of advancement topic, but we can at least recap what we did today. So we started with a cPouta image for Ubuntu 15.04, and the image in question comes with a very basic set of software. So when you're operating in cloud-like fashion, you typically don't have a broad set of software coming with the image. It is possible to customize the image, so the same iRods client would be pre-installed there, but again, a more cloud-like approach would be to start with the simple base image and then write the Ansible playbook for installing any software that you might want to be using for that particular purpose that you have. So in this case, we had one inventory of host here. Of course, this could be a host group. Let's say you need to operate a server farm of 10 servers or whatever. This would be defined in this inventory. And then we did an Ansible playbook definition that could now be reused for any CSC user that wants to use the IDA service with a Ubuntu or other Debian-based Linux image. So for this, you can get the iRods client, Perhaps one enhancement would be to get it via some different conduit than FTP and check package signatures and whatnot for future improvement. But anyway, that is now automated. The installation is now automated and the configuration is automated. So all this could be reused to have a snappier cPouta experience. So I think we're going to be continuing with this existing Ansible Playbook thing in forthcoming webinars, and now we take some questions if need be. So questions can be asked from the Adobe Connect microphone option, or you can ask them in the chat. Or if you don't have any questions, then I most likely have answered all of them, and you are now happy about the newfound information you have about Ansible and automation in cPouta. Looks like we are getting some comments into the chat at least. So I'll wait for those. So how do you uninstall stuff with Ansible? A very good question. So let's say I would have used the apt module for installing something. Of course, there are modules also for pip and equivalent. So in this module's being in question, I would use the state equals absent clause. There might even be an example about that. Yes, so remove foo package apt name equals foo state equals absent. It depends on the module, and if there doesn't happen to be a module readily available, then you can of course fall back into using the shell module running, let's say, sudo pip uninstall some particular package. So there's always the fallback option of shell, but there you lose the kind of checking of the end state, and it's more in line with the traditional shell scripting method, and Ansible is doing things in a little different way. So always check the module if there would be a state absent type of condition for a particular item. I'll still wait if we get another question, because there's typing in the chat. So how would you go about debugging your Ansible playbooks? Again, a very good question. So let's say for this creation of the iRods config, I would be interested about the end state. What I could do is after the name and file declaration, I could do a register some fact, and after this I could then, for example, use the debug module. So in this case, I would use debug with parameter message equals some fact. Off the top of my mind, I don't remember if it works exactly like this, but we can certainly try. So let's rerun the playbook and see what happens. It might be that there is some like sub-variable under the registered fact that I need to reference, but that's the basic idea. So for example, if you want to check the condition of a variable, a debug is something where you can start. Now this, well, here I went via the kind of slow route because I didn't make the get URL module check if the package has been downloaded already. That would have been, of course, possible by the module. You can check for the state of a file, but it wasn't that big of a time we had to wait either. So here we registered the output of the create iRuts config task or play item, and we see that change is false, and you get all sorts of metadata, and you should be able to, for example, refer to fact.owner here. So that's one way of debugging. There are surely others. I suppose another handy thing is this tags. So if I do a debugging tag and define the playbook run like tags equals tag like that, then I only get the particular tagged item as part of the play, and I can skip, for example, downloading the packages and whatnot. But there of course are a lot of other debug options too. And for example, the SSH connections, for those you can enter the verbose flag, so you get much more idea about what's going around when Ansible is forming the connection, and so on and so forth. All right. I think it looks like we're not getting any further questions into the chat. So this time around, clock is 13:37 or late. I declare the webinar closed and thank you for your time. See you next time. Bye-bye.